The text message arrived at 11:47 p.m. on a Tuesday, right as I was reviewing blueprints for the new municipal parking garage. My parents say you're not worthy of me, Caleb. Maybe they're right. I stared at my phone for a full minute, waiting for the follow-up text that would soften the blow. Nothing came. Just those 23 words that summarize 3 years of my life with Ivy Hollingsworth. Fair enough, I typed back. Then I set my phone aside and went back to my blueprints. Before we dive deeper into this story, I have one small request. Please subscribe, drop a like, comment, and hit that hype button to boost this channel so more people can discover these incredible Reddit stories. My name is Caleb Morrison, and I'm a city planner for Millbrook, a mid-sized town where everyone knows everyone else's business. I design parking lots, approve building permits, and attend mind-numbing zoning meetings. It's not glamorous work, but it pays the bills and keeps the city running. At least, that's what I told myself every morning when I looked in the mirror. Ivy worked as a dental hygienist at Premier Dental Associates downtown. She was pretty in that carefully maintained way that required 2 hours of preparation every morning, blonde highlights, perfect teeth, designer clothes that cost more than my monthly rent. We met at a coffee shop 3 years ago when she complained loudly about the barista getting her order wrong. I stepped in, smoothed things over, and somehow ended up with her number. The relationship started well enough. Ivy was charming, funny when she wanted to be, and she made me feel like maybe I was worth something after all. But then I met her parents. Mr. and Mrs. Hollingsworth owned a chain of upscale furniture stores across 3 counties. They lived in a mansion on Elm Ridge, drove matching Mercedes, and treated service workers like they were invisible. The first time Ivy brought me to dinner, her mother actually asked if I was the help. "This is Caleb, Mom, my boyfriend," Ivy had said, her cheeks flushing pink. Mrs. Hollingsworth looked me up and down like I was a stain on her Persian rug. "Oh, how interesting." Mr. Hollingsworth barely looked up from his phone. "What do you do, son?" "I'm a city planner. I work on urban development projects, zoning regulations." "Oh, government work," he interrupted, making it sound like a disease. "Well, I suppose someone has to do it." That dinner set the tone for every interaction I'd have with the Hollingsworth family over the next 3 years. I was tolerated, barely, as a temporary inconvenience in their daughter's life. They made it clear that Ivy could do better, should do better, and would eventually come to her senses. The worst part? Ivy started believing them. It began with small things. She stopped inviting me to work functions. When we went out with her friends, she'd introduce me as just Caleb instead of her boyfriend. She started hiding her phone, taking calls in the bathroom, working late more often. 2 months ago, I overheard her talking to her friend Jessica at a restaurant. I'd gone to the bathroom and was walking back when I heard my name. "Caleb's sweet and all," Ivy was saying, "but he's not exactly going places, you know. My parents keep asking when I'm going to find a real man." "What about that new dentist at your office?" Jessica asked. "Trevor something?" "Trevor Blackwood. He's gorgeous. Drives a BMW, has his own practice. Now that's the kind of man my parents would approve of." I stood there for a moment, processing what I'd heard. Then I walked back to our table, finished my meal, and pretended nothing had happened. But something had changed. I started paying attention to the little details I'd been ignoring. The way Ivy's eyes lit up when she talked about work. The new clothes that appeared in her closet. The expensive perfume she wore to staff meetings. So when that text arrived on Tuesday night, I wasn't surprised. I was almost relieved. I finished reviewing the parking garage plans, filed them away, and went to bed. Tomorrow, I decided, would be the first day of my new life. The next morning, I woke up feeling lighter than I had in months. I made coffee, scrambled some eggs, and ate breakfast while watching the news. No anxious texts from Ivy, no passive-aggressive comments about my career choices, just peace and quiet. My phone buzzed around 9 a.m. Ivy's name flashed on the screen. "We need to talk," the message read. "Nothing to talk about," I replied. "You made your position clear." "Don't be like this, Caleb. Come over tonight. We can work this out." I stared at the message for a long moment. 3 years of my life, reduced to work this out, like I was a problem to be solved rather than a person to be loved. "No thanks," I typed. "Good luck with Trevor." My phone started ringing immediately. I turned it off and headed to work. The Millbrook City Planning Department occupied the 3rd floor of a converted warehouse downtown. It wasn't much to look at, but it was mine. I had my own office, a decent view of the river, and a secretary named Pat, who made excellent coffee and kept the city council members from bothering me too much. "You look different today," Pat said when I walked in. "Good different." "Thanks, Pat. Hold my calls for the first hour, would you? I've got some catching up to do." I spent the morning reviewing permit applications and updating zoning maps. Around 11, my friend Danny stopped by. Danny worked for the city's engineering department and had been my closest friend since college. "Heard through the grapevine that you and Ivy called it quits," he said, settling into the chair across from my desk. "News travels fast." "Small town. You okay?" I leaned back in my chair and considered the question. You know what? I think I am. For the first time in a long time, I feel like I can breathe. Danny nodded. "She never was right for you, man. Too high maintenance. Too worried about what other people thought. Her parents hated me." "Her parents are snobs. Rich people who think their money makes them better than everyone else. You're worth 10 of them, Caleb." It was nice to hear, even if I wasn't sure I believed it yet. That afternoon, I had a zoning hearing for a new medical facility. The applicant was Dr. Nora Chen, a cardiologist who wanted to open a specialized heart clinic on the south side of town. I'd reviewed her application weeks ago and found it thorough and well prepared. Dr. Chen was nothing like what I'd expected. She was tall, confident, with dark hair pulled back in a practical ponytail. She wore a simple blue suit and spoke with the kind of authority that came from saving lives for a living. "The clinic will serve a critical need in our community," she explained to the zoning board. "Currently, patients have to drive 2 hours to reach the nearest cardiac specialist. This facility would provide life-saving care right here in Millbrook." The board approved her application unanimously. As the meeting ended, I found myself walking out beside her. "Congratulations, Dr. Chen. You should have your permits within 2 weeks." "Thank you, Mr. Morrison. I appreciate your help with the application process. Your notes were very thorough." We reached the parking lot, and she stopped beside a practical Honda Civic. No BMW, no status symbol, just reliable transportation. "Can I buy you coffee?" she asked suddenly. "As a thank you for making this process so smooth?" I hesitated for a moment, thinking about Ivy, about the text message, about starting over. "I'd like that," I said. We went to the same coffee shop where I'd met Ivy 3 years ago. The irony wasn't lost on me. "So," Dr. Chen said, settling into a booth with her latte, "tell me about Millbrook. I'm new in town, and I could use some local insight." We talked for an hour about the town, the people, the best restaurants, and worst traffic patterns. She was funny, intelligent, and genuinely interested in what I had to say. When was the last time someone had listened to me like that? "I should get going," she said finally, checking her watch. "I have patients this afternoon, but thank you for the conversation, Caleb. It was exactly what I needed." "Me too," I said, and meant it. As I watched her drive away, my phone buzzed. Another text from Ivy. "I made a mistake. Can we please talk?" I deleted the message without responding and headed back to work. The next few weeks passed in a blur of permit applications, zoning meetings, and slowly rebuilding my life. I cleaned out my apartment, removing every trace of Ivy's presence, her books, her photos, the expensive throw pillows she'd insisted on buying. It all went into boxes that I dropped off at Goodwill. Ivy kept texting. At first, the messages were apologetic. Then they became angry. Finally, they turned desperate. "You're being childish, Caleb." "My parents didn't mean it the way it sounded." "Trevor is just a friend. Please call me back." I ignored them all. Danny took me out for drinks on Friday night to celebrate my newfound freedom. We went to Murphy's Pub, a dive bar near the river that served cheap beer and minded its own business. "You seem different," Danny said, raising his bottle in a toast. "More like the guy I knew in college." "I feel different, like I've been holding my breath for 3 years and finally remembered how to exhale." "So what's next? Dating apps? Blind dates? Pat's got a niece she's been wanting to set you up with." I laughed. "Let's not get ahead of ourselves. I'm still figuring out who I am without Ivy telling me who I should be." We were on our 3rd round when the door opened and Ivy walked in. She wasn't alone. The man beside her was tall, dark-haired, and wearing a suit that probably cost more than I made in a month. He had the kind of confident smile that came from never being told no. This had to be Trevor Blackwood. Ivy spotted me immediately. Her face went pale, then flushed red. She said something to Trevor, who looked over and sized me up with the casual arrogance of someone who'd already won. They found a table across the room, but I could feel Ivy's eyes on me all night. Trevor ordered expensive whiskey and talked loudly about his practice, his car, his plans to expand into cosmetic dentistry. Everything was about status, about success, about being worthy. "Want to get out of here?" Danny asked quietly. "No," I said, surprising myself. "I'm not running away from my own life anymore." We stayed for another hour, talking and laughing like we owned the place. When I finally stood to leave, I walked right past Ivy's table. She grabbed my arm as I passed. "Caleb, wait. We need to talk." I looked down at her hand on my arm, then at Trevor, who was watching with amused interest. "I don't think your boyfriend would appreciate that," I said calmly. "He's not my—" "Yes, I am," Trevor interrupted, standing up. He was taller than me, broader, with the kind of gym-sculpted physique that came from having money and time to spend on personal trainers. "And you are?" "Nobody important," I said. "Just ask the Hollingsworths." I walked away before either of them could respond, but I heard Trevor's laughter following me out the door. That night, I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, replaying the encounter in my mind. The way Trevor had looked at me like I was an insect. The way Ivy had seemed embarrassed, not of him, but of me. The casual dismissal, like I was a problem that had already been solved. For the first time since the breakup, I felt angry. Not hurt, not sad, but genuinely deeply angry. I'd spent 3 years of my life trying to be worthy of people who would never see me as anything more than a temporary inconvenience. I'd let them make me feel small, insignificant, forgettable. Well, maybe it was time to remind them that I wasn't as forgettable as they thought. The next morning, I did something I hadn't done in years. I went for a run. Then I went to the gym. Then I bought new clothes, got a haircut, and made an appointment with a financial advisor to discuss investment options. If Ivy wanted a real man, whatever that meant, then maybe it was time I became one. Not for her, but for me. Monday morning brought a new permit application that caught my attention. Trevor Blackwood, DDS, was requesting approval for a major renovation of his home on Maple Street. The project was extensive: a new garage, expanded driveway, outdoor entertainment area, and swimming pool. The kind of improvements that cost serious money and required months of construction. I reviewed the application carefully, checking every detail against city codes and regulations. Trevor's architect had done good work, but there were a few minor issues that would need to be addressed before approval. Nothing major, nothing that couldn't be fixed with a simple revision, but revisions took time, and time cost money. I set the application aside and made a note to schedule a site inspection for the following week. Due diligence, I told myself. Just doing my job. That afternoon, Dr. Chen stopped by my office with a bottle of wine and a thank you card. "The permits came through ahead of schedule," she said, setting the bottle on my desk. "I wanted to thank you for your help." "Just doing my job, Dr. Chen." "Nora, please, and I was wondering, would you like to have dinner sometime? I promise I won't spend the whole evening talking about cardiac procedures." I looked at her standing there in my office, confident and straightforward, asking for what she wanted without games or manipulation. When was the last time someone had been that direct with me? "I'd like that very much, Nora." "Great. How about Saturday? There's a new Italian place downtown I've been wanting to try." After she left, I sat in my office thinking about the difference between the two women. Ivy, who'd spent 3 years trying to change me into someone her parents would approve of, and Nora, who seemed to like me exactly as I was. My phone buzzed with another text from Ivy. "I saw you at Murphy's with that woman. We really need to talk." This time, I didn't delete the message. Instead, I typed back, "No, we don't. Move on, Ivy. I have." Her response came immediately. "You don't understand. Trevor isn't who you think he is." I stared at the message for a long moment, then turned off my phone. Whatever games Ivy was playing now, I wasn't interested in participating. I had a new life to build, and it was going to be worth something. Saturday night with Nora changed everything. We went to Marcello's, the new Italian restaurant downtown, and talked for 3 hours without a single awkward pause. She was brilliant, funny, and completely unpretentious. When the waiter brought the check, she insisted on splitting it. "I asked you out," she said when I protested. "Besides, I make good money saving lives. I can afford pasta." After dinner, we walked along the river path, talking about everything and nothing. She told me about medical school, about the satisfaction of performing surgery that gave people their lives back. I told her about city planning, about the quiet pride of designing spaces where people could live and work and thrive. "You know what I like about you, Caleb?" she said as we reached her car. "What's that?" "You're not trying to impress me. You're just being yourself. Do you have any idea how rare that is?" I thought about Ivy, about the constant pressure to be someone different, someone better, someone worthy. "Yeah," I said. "I think I do." We made plans for the following weekend. As I watched her drive away, I felt something I hadn't experienced in years. Genuine happiness. That feeling lasted exactly until Monday morning, when Pat handed me a stack of phone messages. "Ivy Hollingsworth called 6 times over the weekend," she said, raising an eyebrow. She seemed persistent. I flipped through the messages. All variations on the same theme. Call me back? It's important. You need to know the truth about Trevor. I tossed them in the trash and got to work. Around 10 a.m., Danny knocked on my door. Got a minute? Always. What's up? He closed the door behind him and took a seat. I heard something interesting at the county planning meeting yesterday, about your ex and her new boyfriend. I'm not interested in gossip, Danny. This isn't gossip. This is professional. Trevor Blackwood has been shopping around for investors in a new dental practice. Big expansion, multiple locations, the kind of thing that requires serious capital. I leaned back in my chair. And word is, he's been telling potential investors that he's engaged to Ivy Hollingsworth, as in the Hollingsworth furniture fortune. He's using her family's money as collateral for loans he can't otherwise qualify for. That was interesting. How do you know all this? My cousin works at First National Bank. She processes commercial loan applications. Trevor's been in there twice in the past month talking about his future in-laws' financial backing. I thought about Ivy's desperate text messages, her insistence that Trevor wasn't who I thought he was. Maybe she was finally seeing what everyone else had figured out from the beginning. Thanks for the heads up, I told Danny, but it's not my problem anymore. Maybe not, but I thought you should know. After he left, I pulled out Trevor's renovation permit application. I'd scheduled the site inspection for Wednesday, but there was no reason I couldn't move it up. Due diligence required thorough review, after all. I called Trevor's office and left a message with his receptionist. Site inspection tomorrow at 10 a.m. Required for permit approval. Tuesday morning, I drove to Maple Street with my clipboard, measuring tape, and camera. Trevor's house was impressive. A colonial revival with perfectly manicured landscaping and a circular driveway. The kind of place that screamed success and status. Trevor met me at the front door, dressed in khakis and a polo shirt that probably cost more than my monthly grocery budget. Mr. Morrison, he said, extending his hand with practiced charm. Thank you for coming out. I'm anxious to get this project started. Just doing my job, Dr. Blackwood. Mind if I take a look around? For the next hour, I measured setbacks, checked drainage, and documented every aspect of the proposed renovation. Trevor followed me around, making small talk and dropping casual mentions of his success, his connections, his bright future. Ivy speaks very highly of you, he said as we examined the proposed pool location. Does she? Oh, yes. She's told me all about your relationship. Ancient history, of course, but she has fond memories. I made a note on my clipboard about potential drainage issues. That's nice. She's quite a woman. Beautiful, charming, and of course, her family connections don't hurt. The Hollingsworths are very well regarded in this community. I'm sure they are. Trevor seemed frustrated by my lack of response. I suppose you've heard we're engaged? I looked up from my clipboard. Congratulations? Thank you. We're planning a spring wedding. Big affair, all the right people. Ivy deserves nothing but the best. I'm sure she does. I finished the inspection and packed up my equipment. I'll have my report completed by Friday, Dr. Blackwood. You should hear back from the permit office within 2 weeks. 2 weeks? I was hoping to break ground next Monday. These things take time. We have to make sure everything meets code requirements. Safety first, you understand? His smile faltered slightly. Of course. Safety first. As I drove back to the office, I thought about Trevor's casual mention of his engagement to Ivy. Either he was lying to impress me, or Ivy was lying to herself about what their relationship really meant. Either way, it wasn't my problem. I spent the rest of the day writing up my inspection report. Trevor's architect had done good work, but there were several issues that needed to be addressed. The proposed pool location violated setback requirements by 18 inches. The new driveway would require additional drainage to prevent runoff into the street. The outdoor kitchen needed to be moved 3 feet to comply with fire safety codes. All fixable problems. All requiring revised plans, additional permits, and several more weeks of processing time. I submitted my report to the permit office and copied Trevor's architect. By city regulations, they had 30 days to submit revised plans. Then the review process would start all over again. Wednesday evening, I was at home grading permit applications when someone knocked on my door. I looked through the peephole and saw Ivy standing in the hallway, looking nervous and determined. I opened the door but didn't invite her in. Hello, Ivy. Caleb, thank you for seeing me. We need to talk. No, we don't. You made your feelings clear. I've moved on. That's just it. I made a mistake. A terrible mistake. Trevor isn't who I thought he was. What do you want me to say? That I'm sorry it didn't work out? That I'll take you back? Because neither of those things is going to happen. Tears started forming in her eyes. He's been using me, Caleb. Using my family's name, our reputation. He told people we were engaged without even asking me. Sounds like a problem you need to solve with Trevor. I tried, but he says if I break up with him, he'll tell everyone that I led him on, that I promised him access to my family's money. He'll ruin my reputation. I leaned against the doorframe, studying her face. For 3 years, I jumped to solve every problem in Ivy's life. Fixed her car, managed her finances, dealt with her difficult friends and demanding parents. It had never been enough. That's unfortunate, I said, but it's not my problem anymore. Please, Caleb. I know I hurt you. I know I was wrong, but I need your help. You need my help? Where was that sentiment when your parents were telling you I wasn't worthy, when you were sneaking around with Trevor behind my back? I never... Yes, you did. I'm not stupid, Ivy. I knew what was happening. I just chose to ignore it because I thought you were worth fighting for. She was crying now, mascara running down her cheeks. I was scared. My parents, they have such strong opinions. They made me feel like I had to choose between you and them. And you chose them. That's fine. Live with your choice. I started to close the door, but she put her hand against it. There's something else. Something you need to know about Trevor. I don't need to know anything about Trevor. He's been asking questions about you, about your job, your access to city records, your authority over permits and zoning approvals. That got my attention. What kind of questions? He wanted to know if you could make problems for his business, if you had the power to delay permits or block developments. He's paranoid that you're going to sabotage him somehow. I almost laughed. Why would I do that? I barely think about either of you anymore. Because you're not the pushover he expected you to be. You didn't fall apart when we broke up. You didn't come crawling back begging for forgiveness. That scares him? Trevor Blackwood is scared of me, the city planner who wasn't worthy of his ex-girlfriend? Yes. And Caleb? Maybe you should be. Before I could ask what she meant, she turned and walked away, leaving me standing in my doorway with more questions than answers. I closed the door and went back to my permit applications, but I couldn't concentrate. Trevor was asking questions about me, worried about what I might do with my position. The funny thing was, until that moment, it had never occurred to me to use my job against him. I'd delayed his permits, sure, but only because his plans didn't meet code requirements. That was just doing my job properly. But now that Ivy had planted the idea in my head, I started thinking about all the ways a city planner could make life difficult for someone like Trevor Blackwood. Hypothetically speaking, of course. Thursday morning brought 2 interesting developments. First, Trevor's architect called to complain about my inspection report. 18 inches? He said, his voice tight with frustration. You're holding up a $250,000 renovation over 18 inches? I'm enforcing city code requirements, I replied calmly. The setback exists for a reason. Property lines, drainage, neighbor relations. You know this, Jim. Jim Patterson had been designing homes in Millbrook for 15 years. He was good at his job and usually thorough with his measurements. The fact that he'd missed the setback requirement by such a large margin was suspicious. Come on, Caleb. We've worked together before. Can't you find some flexibility here? I'm not the one who wrote the codes, Jim. I just enforce them, submit revised plans, and we'll take another look. That's going to cost my client another month. Then your client should have measured more carefully before hiring you. After I hung up, I pulled Trevor's file and reviewed the original plans again. The setback violation wasn't a mistake. The pool location was deliberately designed to maximize the entertainment space. Codes be damned. Trevor had been counting on getting a rubber stamp approval from a small-town planning office that didn't pay attention to details. Too bad for him that I paid attention to everything. The second development came in the form of a phone call from the Millbrook Gazette. Sarah Martinez, the paper's business reporter, wanted to ask me about commercial development trends in the city. I'm working on a story about the economic impact of new medical facilities, she said. Dr. Chen's heart clinic, the proposed dental expansion on Oak Street, that sort of thing. Dr. Chen's clinic will be a great addition to the community, I said. We need more specialized medical services locally. What about the dental expansion? I understand Dr. Blackwood is planning a significant investment in the area. I can't comment on specific permit applications that are still under review. Of course, but generally speaking, how do you evaluate the economic impact of these kinds of projects? I spent 10 minutes giving her background on commercial development, tax revenue, job creation, and community benefit. Standard stuff that would make good filler for her article. One more question, she said as we were wrapping up. I've heard rumors that Dr. Blackwood is having some difficulty with the permit process. Any truth to that? All permit applications go through the same review process, I said carefully. We evaluate each project based on its compliance with city codes and regulations. Some applications require revisions before approval. That's normal. But this particular application has been delayed. I can't discuss specific cases, but I will say that any delays in the permit process are typically the result of incomplete or non-compliant applications. We're very thorough in our reviews. After she hung up, I sat back in my chair and thought about that conversation. Someone had been talking to the press about Trevor's permit problems, someone who knew enough about the situation to ask specific questions. My phone rang again. This time it was Danny. "Did you talk to Sarah Martinez today?" he asked. "Yeah, about commercial development trends." "Why?" "Because I just got off the phone with her. She's asking questions about Trevor Blackwood's finances, his business plans, his relationship with the Hollingsworth family." "What kind of questions?" "The kind that suggests someone gave her a very detailed tip about his business practices, someone who knows about his loan applications, his use of Ivy's family name as collateral, his plans to expand using other people's money." I thought about Ivy's visit the night before, her tears, her desperation to escape Trevor's control. "Interesting. Caleb, please tell me you're not behind this." "I'm not behind anything, Danny. I'm just a city planner who enforces building codes." "Right. And I'm just an engineer who designs bridges." That evening, I had dinner with Nora at a quiet bistro across town. She looked beautiful in a simple black dress, her hair down around her shoulders. More importantly, she looked happy to see me. "Good week?" she asked as we settled into our booth. "Interesting week. Lots of permit applications, zoning reviews, the usual bureaucratic excitement." She laughed. "I love that you find bureaucracy exciting. Most people complain about government red tape." "Red tape exists for a reason. Safety codes, environmental protection, community standards. Without proper oversight, you get chaos." Spoken like a true civil servant. It's actually quite attractive, this dedication to public service. You think bureaucracy is attractive? I think integrity is attractive. The fact that you take your job seriously, that you care about doing the right thing even when no one's watching, that's rare, Caleb. We talked about her clinic, which was ahead of schedule and under budget. She'd hired 3 nurses and a physician's assistant, all local people who wouldn't have to commute to other cities for work. "You made that possible," she said. "Your help with the permits, the zoning approval, the expedited review process. This clinic exists because you believed in the project." "I just did my job." "No, you did more than that. You cared about the outcome, about the impact on the community. That matters." As we walked to our cars after dinner, she took my hand. "I have something to ask you, and I want you to know there's no pressure either way." "Okay. The hospital is having its annual fundraising gala next month. It's a big deal, black tie, all the important people in town. Would you like to go with me?" I thought about the last time I'd attended a formal event with a girlfriend. Ivy had spent 2 hours getting ready, then criticized my rented tuxedo, my conversation skills, and my inability to network properly with her parents' friends. "I'd love to," I said. "Really? You don't need to think about it?" "Nora, I'd be honored to go with you." She smiled and kissed me softly. "Good. Fair warning, though, it's going to be quite a scene. All of Millbrook's elite in one room, trying to outdo each other with their generosity and social connections." "Sounds like fun." "It will be, especially since I'll have the most interesting date there." Friday morning brought the Millbrook Gazette with Sarah Martinez's article on the front page of the business section. The headline read, "Local dental practice expansion raises questions about financing." The article was carefully written, sticking to facts and avoiding direct accusations. But the implications were clear. Trevor Blackwood had been seeking investors and loans based on his claimed connection to the Hollingsworth family fortune. He'd told multiple people that he was engaged to Ivy Hollingsworth and would have access to significant capital through the marriage. The problem was, according to sources close to the family, no engagement had been announced. The Hollingsworths themselves declined to comment on their daughter's relationship status or any potential business investments. The article also mentioned delays in the permit process for Trevor's home renovation, suggesting that his expansion plans might be premature given his current financial situation. I read the article twice, admiring Sarah's careful journalism. She'd painted a picture of a man whose ambitions exceeded his resources, who was using other people's names and reputations to secure financing he couldn't otherwise obtain. My phone started ringing at 8 a.m. First Trevor's architect, then Trevor himself, then someone from his bank. Everyone wanted to know about the permit delays, the inspection problems, the timeline for approval. "Mr. Morrison," Trevor said when I finally took his call, "I need to understand what's happening with my renovation permits. My contractors are scheduled to begin work Monday." As I explained to your architect, Dr. Blackwood, there are several code compliance issues that need to be addressed before we can approve your plans. What kind of issues? Jim Patterson has been designing homes in this town for 15 years. He knows the codes. Setback violations, drainage concerns, fire safety requirements, all detailed in my inspection report. Once you submit revised plans that address these issues, we can schedule a new review. How long will that take? The review process typically takes 2 to 3 weeks once we receive compliant plans. 3 weeks? That's unacceptable. I have contractors lined up, materials ordered, a timeline to meet. I understand your frustration, Dr. Blackwood, but safety codes exist for a reason. We can't approve plans that don't meet city requirements. This is about Ivy, isn't it? The question caught me off guard. I'm sorry? This whole delay, this nitpicking over 18 inches and drainage problems. You're trying to get back at me because of Ivy. I felt a smile tugging at the corner of my mouth. Dr. Blackwood, I can assure you that my review of your permit application was based entirely on code compliance and safety requirements. Your relationship with Ms. Hollingsworth has nothing to do with city planning procedures. I don't believe you. That's your prerogative, but I'd suggest you focus on getting your plans revised rather than speculating about my motivations. You think you're clever, don't you? The overlooked ex-boyfriend getting his petty revenge? I think I'm a city employee doing my job according to established procedures and regulations. We'll see about that. I have friends in this town, connections you can't imagine. This isn't over. Dr. Blackwood, are you threatening a city official? A long pause. Of course not. I'm simply expressing my frustration with an inefficient bureaucratic process. I understand. Have a good day, Dr. Blackwood. After I hung up, I sat back in my chair and thought about that conversation. Trevor was rattled, probably by the newspaper article, definitely by the permit delays. He was starting to realize that his carefully constructed image was developing cracks. And the funny thing was, I really was just doing my job. The setback violations were real. The drainage issues were legitimate concerns. The fire safety requirements were clearly spelled out in city code. If Trevor wanted to blame me for his problems, that was his choice. But the problems themselves were entirely of his own making. My phone buzzed with a text from Nora. Saw the article this morning. Your ex certainly knows how to pick them, I texted back. Not my problem anymore. Good for you. Dinner tonight? I'm buying. You bought last time. Then you can buy next time. I just want to see you. I smiled and typed back. 7 o'clock? Perfect. Wear something nice. We're celebrating. Celebrating what? Your backbone. The hospital fundraising gala was held at the Millbrook Country Club, a sprawling Victorian mansion that had been converted into an event space 20 years ago. Nora looked stunning in a navy blue evening gown, elegant and confident as she worked the room like the accomplished professional she was. I'd rented a proper tuxedo this time, not the cheap polyester thing I'd worn to Ivy's family events. The difference was remarkable. I looked good, felt good, and for the first time in years, I belonged in a room full of successful people. Dr. Chen, you look lovely tonight, said Mayor Patricia Williams, approaching us with a champagne flute in hand. And Mr. Morrison, good to see you outside the office. Mayor Williams, I replied, shaking her hand. Beautiful event. The hospital does excellent work. Dr. Chen's new clinic is going to be a tremendous asset to our community. We spent the next hour mingling with doctors, lawyers, business owners, and civic leaders. Nora introduced me as her partner, not her date, and people treated me with genuine respect. They asked about my work, my opinions on development projects, my thoughts on the city's growth. It was intoxicating, being valued for what I knew rather than dismissed for what I lacked. Around 9 o'clock, I was getting drinks at the bar when I spotted familiar faces across the room. Mr. and Mrs. Hollingsworth had arrived, dressed to the nines and surveying the crowd like generals reviewing troops. They were alone. No Ivy, no Trevor, just the two of them making their grand entrance. Caleb Morrison, Mrs. Hollingsworth said, appearing beside me at the bar. What a surprise to see you here. Mrs. Hollingsworth, you look lovely tonight. Thank you, dear. I understand you're here with Dr. Chen. How wonderful. Such an accomplished woman, and so important to our community. The change in her tone was remarkable. 3 months ago she'd treated me like hired help. Tonight she was practically purring. Nora is amazing, I agreed. I'm very lucky. Indeed you are. You know, Richard and I have been thinking about you lately. We always thought you were a fine young man, very dedicated to public service. I almost choked on my drink. That's very kind of you to say. We were sorry to hear about you and Ivy, of course, but sometimes these things work out for the best, don't they? You've clearly landed on your feet. I have, thank you. Mr. Hollingsworth joined us, extending his hand with practiced charm. Caleb, good to see you, son. Congratulations on your relationship with Dr. Chen. Brilliant woman, excellent reputation. Thank you, sir. You know, we've been following the development of her clinic with great interest. Wonderful addition to the community. I imagine your expertise was invaluable in navigating the permit process. I was happy to help. Of course you were, always so dedicated, so thorough in your work. He leaned closer, lowering his voice. I don't suppose you've heard from Ivy recently? No, sir. We don't really keep in touch. Mrs. Hollingsworth sighed dramatically. She's been going through a difficult time lately. Poor judgment in her choice of companions, I'm afraid. I'm sorry to hear that. That dentist she's been seeing, Trevor something, turns out he's been using our family name for his business ventures without our permission. Very inappropriate behavior. That must be frustrating. Indeed it is. We've had to make some very clear statements to our bank, our attorney, our business associates. The Hollingsworth name is not to be used as collateral for anyone else's financial schemes. I nodded sympathetically while internally marveling at their performance. 3 months ago, they'd been thrilled about Ivy's relationship with the successful dentist. Now that his reputation was damaged, they were distancing themselves as quickly as possible. Well, I said, I should get back to Nora. She's probably wondering where I disappeared to. Of course, dear, Mrs. Hollingsworth said, patting my arm. Do give her our regards. And Caleb, if you ever need anything at all, don't hesitate to call. I rejoined Nora at our table, where she was deep in conversation with the hospital's chief of staff about cardiac surgery protocols. Sorry, I said, taking my seat. Ran into some old acquaintances at the bar. The Hollingsworths, she said without looking up. I saw them corner you. Everything okay? Fine. They were being unusually friendly. Success changes people's perception of you, Dr. Martinez said from across the table. When you're with someone important, suddenly you become important too. Is that what this is? I asked Nora quietly. She turned to face me fully. Caleb, you were important before you met me. You just didn't realize it. The Hollingsworths are realizing it now because their daughter's poor choices have made them reassess their own judgment. What do you mean? I mean, Ivy's boyfriend has been exposed as a fraud, their family name has been dragged through the mud, and they're scrambling to rebuild their reputation. Dating a respected cardiologist makes you part of the solution rather than part of the problem. As if summoned by our conversation, Ivy appeared at our table. She was dressed in a silver cocktail dress that probably cost more than my monthly salary, but she looked tired, stressed, older than her 30 years. Hello, Caleb. Dr. Chen. Ivy, I replied neutrally. I was hoping I could speak with you privately, she said, her eyes darting around the room nervously. I don't think that's appropriate, Nora said calmly. Please. It's important. I looked at Nora, who shrugged. I'll be right here, she said. Ivy and I walked to a quiet corner of the ballroom, away from the crowd and the music. You look good, she said. Happy. I am happy. I'm glad. You deserve to be happy, Caleb. I know I didn't always make you feel that way. What do you want, Ivy? She took a deep breath. Trevor's been arrested. That got my attention. Arrested for what? Fraud. Wire fraud, specifically. The FBI raided his office yesterday morning. Apparently he's been running some kind of investment scheme, using fake documents and forged signatures to secure loans. I'm sorry to hear that. Are you? Because this all started with that newspaper article, and the permit delays, and the questions about his finances. Ivy, I had nothing to do with Trevor's arrest. If he was committing fraud, that's on him. But you knew, didn't you? You knew something was wrong, and you decided to expose him. I thought about that accusation. Had I known Trevor was committing fraud? No. Had I suspected he was using Ivy's family name inappropriately? Yes. Had I done anything about it beyond enforcing legitimate building codes? No. I didn't expose anything, I said finally. I just did my job. Your job doesn't include talking to reporters. I answered questions about commercial development trends. That's part of my job as a city planner. She stared at me for a long moment, tears forming in her eyes. He's going to blame me, you know, Trevor. He's going to say I set him up, that I gave information to the press to get back at him. Did you? I might have mentioned some things to Sarah Martinez, about his business plans, his use of my family's name. I was angry, scared. I wanted him to stop using me. Then you did the right thing. Did I? Because now he's facing federal charges, and he's telling anyone who will listen that I'm the one who destroyed his life. My reputation, my family's reputation, it's all ruined. I felt a flicker of sympathy for her, but it was overwhelmed by a much stronger emotion: satisfaction. For 3 years, Ivy had made me feel like I wasn't good enough, smart enough, successful enough to deserve her love. She'd chosen status over substance, appearances over authenticity. Now she was learning what it felt like to have your worth questioned by people who didn't really know you. "I'm sorry you're going through this," I said, and meant it. "But it's not my responsibility to fix your problems anymore." "I know. I wanted you to know that I understand now. What I put you through, how I made you feel. I was wrong, Caleb, about everything." "Thank you for saying that. Is there any chance we could try again? Start over?" I looked across the room at Nora, who was laughing at something Dr. Martinez had said. She was brilliant, confident, successful in her own right. She didn't need me to validate her worth, and she didn't need to diminish mine to feel better about herself. "No, Ivy, there isn't." She nodded, wiping her eyes carefully to avoid smudging her makeup. I figured, but I had to ask. "Take care of yourself, and next time choose someone who values you for who you are, not what your family can do for them." "Like you did?" "Like I did." I walked back to the table, where Nora was holding my chair. "Everything okay?" she asked. "Everything's perfect," I said, taking her hand. The rest of the evening passed in a blur of dancing, conversation, and quiet satisfaction. When the auction began, Nora bid on a weekend getaway to a mountain resort. When she won, she turned to me with a smile. "Hope you like hiking," she said. "I love hiking, especially with good company." As we drove home that night, Nora reached over and took my hand. "Can I tell you something?" she said. "Of course. When I first met you at that zoning hearing, I thought you were attractive, smart, professional, good at your job. But tonight, watching you handle your ex-girlfriend with such grace and dignity, I realized something." "What's that?" "You're not just attractive. You're genuinely good, kind, principled, secure in yourself. Do you have any idea how rare that is?" I thought about Trevor, rotting in a federal holding cell because his greed had exceeded his common sense. I thought about Ivy, finally understanding that worth couldn't be measured in bank accounts and social connections. I thought about the Hollingsworths, scrambling to distance themselves from the mess their snobbery had helped create. "I'm starting to," I said. 3 weeks later, I was reviewing drainage reports when Pat buzzed my intercom. "Caleb, there's a gentleman here to see you. Says it's about the Blackwood permit application." "Send him in." The man who entered my office was tall, thin, and wearing an expensive suit that screamed federal law enforcement. He had the kind of pale complexion that came from spending too much time in windowless offices, and his handshake was firm without being aggressive. "Mr. Morrison, Agent David Park, FBI Financial Crimes Division. I was hoping you could answer a few questions about Dr. Trevor Blackwood's permit applications." "Of course. Please, have a seat." Agent Park settled into the chair across from my desk and pulled out a small notebook. "Dr. Blackwood has claimed that delays in his permit process were the result of personal harassment rather than legitimate code violations. I'm trying to verify the timeline and circumstances of those delays." "I'd be happy to walk you through the process." For the next 30 minutes, I explained the permit review procedures, showed him Trevor's original plans, detailed the code violations I'd identified, and provided documentation of every interaction I'd had with Trevor and his architect. "So these setback violations," Agent Park said, studying the plans, "they're legitimate concerns?" "Absolutely. The proposed pool location would have violated city setback requirements by 18 inches. That's not a minor technicality. It's a significant code violation that could have resulted in neighbor complaints, drainage issues, and potential liability for the city." "And the timeline for addressing these violations?" "Standard procedure. Submit revised plans, schedule a new inspection, complete the review process. Typically takes 2 to 3 weeks once we receive compliant plans." Agent Park made notes in his book. "Dr. Blackwood never submitted revised plans?" "No, sir. He chose to focus on appealing the violations rather than fixing them." "I see. And your personal relationship with Ms. Hollingsworth, did that influence your review of Dr. Blackwood's application in any way?" I'd been expecting this question. "Agent Park, I've been a city planner for 8 years. I've reviewed thousands of permit applications. My personal relationships have never influenced my professional decisions, and they didn't influence this one." "But you were aware that Dr. Blackwood was romantically involved with your ex-girlfriend?" "I was aware, yes. But the code violations in his plans were real, documented, and significant. Any qualified inspector would have identified the same issues." Agent Park nodded and closed his notebook. Thank you for your time, Mr. Morrison. Your documentation is very thorough. Just doing my job. Indeed. For what it's worth, Dr. Blackwood's permit problems are the least of his concerns right now. We've uncovered evidence of wire fraud, investment fraud, and identity theft going back 3 years. His claims about harassment seem to be part of a pattern of blaming others for problems of his own making. After Agent Park left, I sat in my office thinking about justice, karma, and the strange ways life had of balancing the scales. Trevor Blackwood was facing federal charges not because I'd sabotaged him, but because his own greed and dishonesty had finally caught up with him. The irony was perfect. He'd spent so much time and energy trying to appear successful that he'd forgotten to actually be successful. He'd been so focused on status and image that he'd lost sight of substance and integrity. My phone buzzed with a text from Nora. "Lunch today? I have news." "Good news or bad news?" I texted back. "Good news. Very good news." We met at our usual place, a small cafe near the hospital where Nora could grab a quick meal between surgeries. She was practically glowing when I arrived. "Okay," I said, sliding into the booth across from her. "What's the good news?" "The clinic is exceeding all our projections. We're seeing twice as many patients as we expected, we're already profitable, and I've had inquiries from 3 other doctors who want to join the practice." "That's fantastic, Nora. Congratulations." "It gets better. The hospital board has approved funding for a second clinic on the north side of town. They want me to oversee the expansion." "Wow, that's a huge opportunity." "It is, and I was thinking—" She paused, suddenly looking nervous. "I was thinking I might need a consultant, someone who understands zoning regulations, permit processes, site selection criteria." I grinned. "Are you offering me a job, Dr. Chen?" "I'm offering you a partnership, Chen Morrison Medical Development. We'd handle site selection, permit acquisition, and project management for medical facilities throughout the region." I stared at her, processing what she was saying. "You want to start a business together?" "I want to build something together, something that matters, something that helps people. What do you think?" I thought about my job at the city planning office, the steady paycheck, the comfortable routine. Then I thought about the possibility of building something new, something important, with a woman who valued my skills and respected my judgment. "I think it sounds amazing," I said. "But are you sure you want to go into business with a guy who's not worthy?" She reached across the table and took my hand. "Caleb Morrison, you are the most worthy man I've ever met, and I can't wait to show the world what we can accomplish together." That afternoon, I drafted my resignation letter. 2 weeks' notice, effective immediately after we completed the transition of my current projects. Pat cried when I told her. Danny bought me a beer and said it was about time I took a real risk. Mayor Williams called me into her office on Friday. "I hear you're leaving us," she said, gesturing for me to take a seat. "Yes, ma'am. New opportunity." "Dr. Chen's expansion project. Smart move, Caleb. You two make a good team." "Thank you. I hope so." "Before you go, I wanted to thank you for your work on the Blackwood case. Agent Park spoke very highly of your documentation and professionalism." "Just doing my job." "You did more than that. You maintained your integrity under pressure, followed proper procedures despite personal complications, and provided law enforcement with the evidence they needed to pursue a complex fraud case. That's exemplary public service." I felt a flush of pride. "Thank you, Mayor Williams. That means a lot." You know, there's a certain poetic justice to the whole situation. Dr. Blackwood spent so much time trying to prove he was worthy of success that he forgot to actually earn it. Meanwhile, you were quietly doing excellent work, building real relationships, creating genuine value. I hadn't thought of it that way. Success isn't about impressing other people, Caleb. It's about becoming the kind of person who deserves success. You figured that out. Dr. Blackwood never did. My last day at the planning office was bittersweet. I'd spent 8 years in that building, 8 years learning my profession and building my reputation. But I was ready for something new, something bigger. Nora picked me up at 5 o'clock in her practical Honda Civic. "How does it feel?" she asked as we drove through downtown Millbrook. "Terrifying. Exciting. Right?" "Good. Those are exactly the feelings you should have when you're about to change your life." We drove past Trevor's house on Maple Street. There was a for sale sign in the front yard and plywood covering the windows. The half-completed renovation had been abandoned, leaving the property looking like a construction site. "Think he'll ever get out of prison?" Nora asked. "Eventually. But his reputation is destroyed, his assets are frozen, and his business is finished. Even if he serves minimal time, he'll never practice dentistry again." "And Ivy?" I thought about my ex-girlfriend, who'd called me twice since the gala but hadn't left messages. According to Danny, she'd moved back in with her parents and was looking for work outside the dental field. Ivy will be fine, I said. She's young, smart, and she's learned some hard lessons about choosing partners based on substance rather than status. She'll figure it out. Do you feel sorry for her? A little, but mostly I feel grateful. Grateful. If she hadn't broken up with me, if her parents hadn't convinced her I wasn't worthy, I never would have been free to meet you. I never would have discovered what it feels like to be with someone who values me for who I am rather than who I might become. Nora smiled and reached over to squeeze my hand. In that case, I should probably send the Hollingsworths a thank you note. We drove to the river overlook, where we'd had our first real conversation after dinner. The sun was setting over the water, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. So, Nora said as we stood at the railing. Ready to become an entrepreneur? Ready to become your partner, I corrected, in business and everything else. Everything else? I turned to face her, taking both her hands in mine. Nora Chen, you are brilliant, beautiful, and the most genuine person I've ever known. You see value in people and projects that others overlook. You build things that matter. You make me want to be the best version of myself. Caleb, I love you. Not because you're successful, not because you make me look good, not because your parents approve of me. I love you because you're you, and if you'll have me, I'd like to spend the rest of my life proving that I'm worthy of that love. She was quiet for a long moment, studying my face in the fading light. You know what I realized tonight? She said finally. What's that? Worth isn't something you prove to other people. It's something you recognize in yourself. And Caleb Morrison, you are worth everything. She kissed me then, soft and sweet and full of promise. As we stood there by the river, holding each other and planning our future, I thought about the strange journey that had brought us together. Trevor Blackwood had been sentenced to 4 years in federal prison and ordered to pay restitution to his victims. His dental practice was closed, his assets liquidated, his reputation destroyed. He'd lost everything in his pursuit of success that wasn't really his. Ivy had moved to another city, started over with a new job and a new perspective on what mattered in relationships. Her parents had quietly donated a substantial sum to the hospital's cardiac wing, perhaps as penance for their years of snobbery and poor judgment. And me? I'd discovered that being not worthy in the eyes of people who valued the wrong things was actually a compliment. I'd learned that real worth came from integrity, kindness, and the courage to build something meaningful with someone who truly mattered. 6 months later, Chen Morrison Medical Development completed its first project, a state-of-the-art cardiac clinic that would serve 3 counties. The ribbon-cutting ceremony was attended by the mayor, the hospital board, and half the town. As Nora and I stood together, scissors in hand, ready to officially open our first joint venture, I caught sight of a familiar figure in the crowd. Agent Park was there, smiling and applauding with everyone else. After the ceremony, he approached us with congratulations. "Beautiful facility," he said, shaking our hands. "You should be proud." "Thank you, Agent Park. How's the Blackwood case progressing?" "Closed, actually. He pled guilty to all charges, received a 4-year sentence, and is currently serving time at a minimum security facility in Pennsylvania. His victims will receive full restitution, and he's barred from practicing dentistry for life." "Justice served," Nora said. "Indeed. You know, Mr. Morrison, Dr. Blackwood asked me to pass along a message to you." "Oh?" "He wanted you to know that he finally understands what it means to be worthy. Apparently prison has given him time to reflect on his choices and their consequences." I thought about that for a moment. "I hope he finds peace with himself." "That's very generous of you, considering how he treated you." "Agent Park, the best revenge is living well. Trevor Blackwood destroyed his own life through greed and dishonesty. I didn't need to do anything except stay true to my principles and build something worth building." As Agent Park walked away, Nora slipped her arm through mine. "So," she said, "what's next for Chen Morrison Medical Development?" "Whatever we want it to be. We've got the rest of our lives to figure it out." I liked the sound of that. We stood there in front of our clinic, watching the crowd celebrate the newest addition to Millbrook's medical community. Doctors, nurses, city officials, and ordinary citizens who would benefit from the cardiac care now available in their own town. It was worth every moment of doubt, every setback, every challenge we'd overcome to get here. It was worth everything.